As indicated in our lesson, art is everywhere. And by everywhere, I mean everywhere in the world. From a single piece of trash to Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa painting. So let's go explore more.
Renaissance art is the time of rebirth, as suggested by the Renaissance word in French, rebirth. It is an expansion for religious interpretation, scientific discovery, exploration of new lands, and the flourishing of the arts. Renaissance art is a type of art that emerged during the Renaissance period in Europe. It is characterized by its use of perspective and realism, generally described as taking place from the 14th century to the 17th century. The Renaissance promoted the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. The most notable of the art being the paintings, the sculptures, music, literature, and even architecture. Renaissance art was heavily influenced by ancient Greek and Roman art and served as a rebirth of the classical era. The movement was founded by Italian humanists who believe in the individual's ability to achieve greatness. The themes of works changed from just being about religion to include Greek and Roman mythology and history, as well as other books and eventually contemporary events. Renaissance art was so important and influential on that period that we, people of the present, still admire the beauty of the rebirth.
The origin or history of Renaissance art. Italy was the main location of the Renaissance. A great paradigm shift from the dark medieval times occurred between 14th and 16th centuries, producing innovative thinkers such as Nicholas Copernicus, an artist, and many others. This period devalued the medieval era that had come before it in favor of a new and brighter era that would draw inspiration from the Greek and Roman traditions of antiquity.
In this part, we tackle all about painting. Painting is all about the math, science, and art in Italy in this time resulted in the discovery of perspective in the arts. The achievement allowed for the configuration of new space in the paintings, replacing the flattened stock space with mathematically accurate depth and dimension, which produced realistic art. Greek and Roman mythology as well as other parts of religion serve as inspiration of paintings which invite viewers to reflect on the connection between religion and philosophy. There are 4 examples of painting. So number 1 is Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci. Number 2 is The Creation of Adam by Michelangelo Buonarroti. And number 3 is The Last Supper by Raffaello Sanzio. Number 4 is The School of Athens by Leonardo da Vinci. There are 4 famous painters that you can see. So number 1 is Raffaello Sanzio. Number 2 is Leonardo da Vinci, which is the famous painter that paint Mona Lisa. And number 3 is Michelangelo Buonarroti. And number 4 is the Donato di Niccolo di Bentobarde. So that's all for these topics, and I hope you learned something.
Thank you, Jalmark. And now for the Renaissance sculpture. Renaissance sculpture is understood as a process of recovery of the sculpture of classical antiquity. The common theme of Renaissance art is religion, and the materials and techniques of Renaissance art gave it a distinct style and meaning. Sculptures were most often carved from marble, but bronze and gold were also used. So if you're wondering why marble is often used, because marble was prized for its translucency, durability, and naturalistic physical properties. So as you can see on our PowerPoint, there are many examples of sculpture and sculptors that made them. Here are Hercules and Cacus by Bartolomeo Bandinello, Abduction of a Sabina Woman by Giambologna, Gates of Paradise by Lorenzo Ghiberti, and Moses by Michelangelo for the tomb of Pope Julius II. and many more beautiful artwork. And that is for the Renaissance sculpture. Now, Timbal will be taking the virtual floor.
Thank you, Miss Sandara. And now let us all talk about architecture. Have you ever wondered about how buildings are designed? Do you ever appreciate its beauty and uniqueness? For you to learn more about architecture, let's travel to the Renaissance period where architecture was majestic. Renaissance architecture focused on the classical notions of beauty based on proportion and symmetry. It has also incorporated geometry, and many building plans were symmetrical squares. Renaissance architecture was a major influence on building design, and it is an era that modern architects still regularly study as a part of their course. The creation of great churches, monuments, and buildings filtered down to even modest residences. So, the influence of Renaissance architecture has a huge impact on today's architecture. Amazing, right? So let us begin our discoveries on Renaissance architecture. These are the famous buildings known for their uniqueness and amazing design. Palazzo Farnese in Rome, Italy, St. Peter's Basilica in Vatican City, and Duomo Santa Maria del Fiore. And introducing to you the talented and famous architects in Renaissance period: Francesco Talente, Emilio di Fabri, Arnoldo di Cambio, and Filippo Brunelleschi. That is all for architecture. Thank you so much for listening, and now I am passing the mic to Mr. Nino Tinga.
So, thank you for that wonderful discussion about Renaissance architecture, Lindsay. And now, let's talk about Renaissance music. Renaissance music is based on modes. It has richer texture, with 4 or more independent melodic parts being performed simultaneously. This interweaving melodic lines, a style called polyphony, is one of the defining features of Renaissance music. Blending, rather than contrasting melodic lines in the musical texture. Harmony, that placed a greater concern on the smooth flow of the music and its progression of chords. The instruments usually used are organs, Irish harp, hurdy-gurdy, lyre, and hornpipe. So here is an example of music. These music are composed by a famous Renaissance composer named Josquin des Prez. And these songs are Motet, Ave Maria, Gracia Plena. And some of the famous musicians in the Renaissance era is Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina, William Byrd, Giovanni Gabriele, and Andrea Gabriele. And that's all for Renaissance music.
Thank you, Nina. That's how amazing music is. So literature. Renaissance literature can be viewed as a return to the literary forms of antiquity, such as satire and effect poetry. Many literary scholars, however, point out that Renaissance literature also reflected many of the new ideas spreading through European culture at that time. Humanism, philosophical doctrine, amount of life force it possesses. Some of the ideas found in Renaissance literature include the doctrine of humanism, a philosophical school of thought that placed importance upon human potential and the ability to find meaning and value in earthly life rather than merely in the afterlife. Many works of Renaissance literature also expounded upon the idea taken from the antiquity of the great chain of being, a philosophical doctrine that stated that every object in the entire universe occupied a place in the pre-designed hierarchy depending on the amount of life force it possessed. Examples of literature: Hamlet by William Shakespeare, The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes, King Lear by William Shakespeare. Famous writers: William Shakespeare, Niccolo Machiavelli, Christopher Marlowe, Thomas More. And that's for literature. Now Donna will be taking the virtual stage.
Have you ever wondered what are the impacts of Renaissance to society? But before we talk about these things, let me first introduce to you what is Renaissance art. Renaissance art is a period of revival creativity. Now, there are 5 characteristics of Renaissance art that changed the world. First is a positive willingness to learn and explore. Next is faith in the nobility of a man or humanism. Third, the discovery and mastery of linear perspective. After which is the rebirth of naturalism. And last is secularism. And that's it for the impacts of Renaissance to society. Now, do you wanna hear some trivias? Of course you do. Stay tuned because Sereno will be taking the floor.
Our trivia for today. Did you know what's being unique about Renaissance art? So Renaissance art is marked by a gradual shift from the abstract forms of medieval period to the representational forms of 15th century. Subject grew from the mostly biblical scenes to include portraits, episodes from classical religion, and events from contemporary life. So when the Renaissance art start and end? So basically, the Renaissance art was a fervent period of European cultural, artistic, and political and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages, generally described as taking place from the 14th century to the 17th century. The Renaissance art promoted the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. And that's it for today, and thank you.